Miters look great until they don't. Folded corners are great, but not always practical. Butt joints get no respect, but they work. Here's the breakdown of all 3 corner methods and which ones actually work. We have a couple of examples of these type of corners on this particular deck, so we thought it might be a cool way to just show you a couple different techniques of how we wrap a corner with our fascia boards. There's lots of different ways to trim a deck, and I acknowledge this, and there's various arguments on the internet all the time about which way's best, which way should I do it, why do you do it this way, why do you do it that way. The reason I'm known as the anti-miter on the internet is because over the years, before pocket screws were a thing and all these hot glues for PVC and other products that work really well with our decking products were invented, miters always fell apart. And you still have that issue on composite decks as well. So wood decks, composite decks, even PVC decks, in my climate, there are severe temperature swings just like there is in a lot of other places in the country. And when things expand and contract all the time, they usually don't stay together. That's why miters come apart. And usually the tip will stay together because somehow it's fastened, screwed, or something like that. And then the backside, it usually moves a little bit, and that's why that moves around. Now, a lot of guys are doing these returns on staircases, and they'll flip the board over and they'll glue the corner together, and then they'll Craig jig or pocket screw the pieces together. But remember, that works great because it's only a 1-foot piece of decking connected to a 4-foot piece of decking. There's not a lot of room for expansion and contraction. My concern with all that is that, let's say it's a longer board, and then you have these parts that are connected, and it's winter when you install it. Or let's say it's summer when you install it, and then the winter gets cold, so the boards are naturally going to contract a little bit. And that's when you start having problems, is when the crows keep cawing. Caw! And so you have this back and forth with the continual expansion and contraction of the materials. So we've come up with a couple different methods that we use to combat that. The fancy one, the one that takes the most amount of time, we call it a folded corner. And that's where we take a piece of decking and we cut a V-notch in the center of the trim piece, and then we heat it up, and then we fold it into a 90-degree or a 22.5. I have examples of both of those, or we'll call it a 90-degree and a 45-degree angle. Okay, so here's a folded corner in a 90-degree fashion. We have a board, and we have about an 8-inch return on each side, okay? This piece was pre-made, and we cut a 45. We also have a router jig and all that, but we're really limited on space where we're working, so we just made this one on the chop saw. We cut this groove, and then we heated up this line right here, and then we were able to fold that into a 90-degree angle, right? Like so. And this is what I use my square while I'm making these parts. I use my square to kind of get us close to where we need to be. So what that does is it gives you a nice, clean, looks like a miter, but then the end of this has a really nice curved edge that the miter doesn't go through it. It stops just short of it, okay? And that will stay like that for a long time. And then what we did is we could have made these shorter if we wanted to. I made them all the same length, and I'll show you why in a minute on the other side. And then we have what is our expansion joint right here for expansion and contraction. So as the deck heats up and moves around, this is where the controlled joint is, instead of here, which is where this would fall apart eventually. If you try to run a screw and Cortex this, the screw depth is going to be down into here. It's barely holding on. So that's why, like, if this was just a regular mitered joint right here, this is going to fall apart if you do it the old-fashioned way. But when you do it like this, and a lot of people say, well, I don't like this. Well, too bad, because that's where things are going to move and expand and contract, and this is always going to look this way. It's never going to look foul or bad, all right? So let's go over and look at this 22.5. You can see over here, we have a 45-degree angle. So this is cut on a 22.5, same technique, same heated corner, folded. And then again, running this about this long, because I usually like to cover this piece, but if I stop the board right here, then I'm forced to put a screw right here, and then you'll see the screw in the deck board crack. So we run these long so that you can get the screw over this way into this next board, and then it holds up a lot better. Then if we want, we can add another screw a little bit further back so it doesn't poke through, and you won't see it through the deck board. Same technique, and again, just a cool way to do your corners on your deck. Some people run their fascia low and run the deck board over the top of it, and they do a surface border. Well, this deck didn't have a surface border, so these end grains are showing, okay, which is fine. You know, some decks are done that way. This is our premium install. This is the premium way that we do on most decks that we build. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do this. You can do an overlapping internal miter or a butt joint where, like, if you have an internal corner, like so, if you got two pieces coming in like this, you don't really need to make this piece. You can just overlap or miter the internal, and it's usually not gonna come apart on an inside miter. It might if it's not fastened properly, but usually that one's gonna be okay. So you can kind of see that over here. So even though this is going from a straight to an angle, because it's like a compound, almost like a compound angle, compound miter, because this is a access ramp, there's a 10-degree slope over here. So instead of trying to miter this in, we just butt joint it. We bring one piece this way, and then we just brought the second piece to here with a 10-degree miter on it, and that looks great. And that corner is solid. It's never gonna come apart. It's always gonna stay that way. And there's no end grain showing or anything like that. So that's another method that we use for doing corners. Now that's an inside corner, but it's still a corner, right? Okay, now we're gonna come over here. All right, now here's an example of a butt joint. And the reason I like using these in this instance, most of this is gonna get covered eventually with dirt or rocks or something like that. So what we did here is we brought this board down, and it's going back at a 90-degree angle from itself. So even though it's on a 10-degree angle, it's still beveled back. And we were able to overlap this piece of decking to this piece, and then we were able to use through screws and Cortex this corner. So we have solid attachment from piece to piece, and then we're attaching this to the face of this as well. So that turned out really sweet. Then we just put a little bit of end grain paint on the end of this. Sometimes we do glue ups, where we actually glue a piece of the end grain or the capstock to the outside of this. But because this is gonna be pretty much covered all the way to here, I didn't see the value in doing that. So we went ahead and just painted it because we knew it was gonna get covered. This is a little bit simpler way, less expensive, less time consuming way to wrap the deck, but it's still effective. It works really well. It doesn't come apart. It stays like this year after year after year. I've been back 10 years on decks before that I've done this technique, and it still looks the same as it did the day I installed it. So that's why if I did this corner in a miter and I didn't fold the corner, we would definitely have a problem with it in the future because it wouldn't stay together. Especially on an external corner mitered with fascia that's on its edge and not flat. It's really hard to keep that corner together because you're trying to use glue and screws and finish nails and all kinds of other things, and you're gonna have a really hard time putting it together. And if you get it together and it looks nice, it's still possibly gonna come apart in the future. So that's why we do these type of techniques. So if you wanna learn a little bit more about folded corners, don't forget to click the link below to check out a video that we've done on it. And also, I think we've also done videos on end caps, like gluing on end caps as well. So don't forget to check that out, guys. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified when we're putting out new content. Have a great day.